The coffee cup trembled in my hands as I stared at the amber liquid. 2 days ago, I'd refused to give my son $100,000 from my retirement fund. Now, watching my daughter-in-law stir something into my drink with that secretive smile, everything clicked into place. The bitter almond smell wasn't my imagination after all. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Harold Jenkins. Most folks call me Harry. At 72, I thought I'd seen it all, survived Vietnam, buried my sweet Elaine after 43 years of marriage, and watched my only son Robert grow from a curious boy into a man with a family of his own. My life these days is simple. Morning coffee on the porch, afternoon walks around the neighborhood, and evenings with my dog Rusty watching old westerns on TV. Nothing fancy, but it was enough. Robert was always a bright kid. Smart as a whip, but with a weakness for taking shortcuts. Even as a boy, he'd look for the easy way out. I remember teaching him to fish when he was 9. While I was showing him how to tie the perfect knot, he'd already clipped on some store-bought contraption that did the job in half the time. "Work smarter, not harder, Dad," he'd say with that crooked smile. That attitude served him well in the tech industry, where he made good money, though never quite enough for the lifestyle his wife Melissa wanted. Elaine and I weren't wealthy by any means. I worked 40 years at the same manufacturing plant, starting on the floor, and eventually making my way to operations manager. We saved every penny we could. No fancy vacations, no luxury cars. We bought our modest 3-bedroom house in '79 and paid it off over 20 years. The best investment we ever made was putting Robert through college without a single loan. Education is the one thing nobody can take away from you, I'd tell him. Elaine would squeeze my hand when I said that, proud of the sacrifice we were making. After Elaine passed 5 years ago, I lived alone with just enough retirement money to keep me comfortable if I was careful. The house was paid for, and between my pension and Social Security, I managed just fine. I even had a nest egg of about $320,000 that I'd saved over the decades. Money. I'd planned to leave to Robert and his 2 kids eventually. Robert and Melissa would visit every few weeks, sometimes with my grandkids, sometimes without. I noticed the pattern early on. Visits became more frequent when they wanted something. A loan for a kitchen renovation that was never repaid. Money for the kids' private school tuition. A down payment for their second car. I never minded helping out, especially when it involved my grandchildren, but something about Melissa's expectation bothered me. She'd drop hints about things they deserved or needed, without ever acknowledging where the money was coming from. Everything changed 3 weeks ago. Robert called on a Tuesday evening, unusually late for him. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," he said, his voice tense. "Can we come over tomorrow?" They arrived just after lunch the next day. I'd made coffee and set out some of those store-bought cookies Melissa liked. Robert seemed nervous, constantly glancing at his wife, who nodded encouragingly at him. I knew something was up. "Dad," Robert began, clearing his throat, "an amazing opportunity has come up. A chance to invest in a startup that's guaranteed to triple our money within a year." I felt my stomach tighten. So in my experience, nothing that guarantees to triple your money is legitimate. "We need some capital to get in on the ground floor," he continued, the rehearsed words tumbling out. "We're putting in everything we have, but we're still short. We need $100,000. The amount hit me like a physical blow. 1/3 of everything I had left. "It's not really for us," Melissa chimed in, leaning forward with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "It's for the children's future. For your grandchildren." I looked at my son, the boy I'd taught to fish and drive and shave. Something in his eyes didn't seem right, a desperation I'd never seen before. "Tell me about this investment," I said carefully. What followed was a convoluted explanation about cryptocurrency, NFTs and exclusive investor pools, terms I barely understood, delivered with the quick-talking confidence of a man repeating something he'd been told, but didn't fully grasp himself. "So your friend Mark is running this?" I asked, recalling the college buddy who'd once convinced Robert to invest in a food truck venture that went bankrupt within 6 months. "He's connected to the people running it," Robert hedged. "But it's legitimate, Dad. Really big names involved." I took a deep breath. "I need time to think about this, son." "That's a lot of money." Melissa's smile faltered. "We need to move quickly on this. The opportunity closes in 3 days. Then I'll give you my answer in two, I replied firmly. They left shortly after, Robert looking defeated, Melissa's face a mask of barely concealed anger. As I watched their car pull away, I felt a heaviness in my chest. Not just from the request, but from the feeling that I was missing something important. The next day I called my old friend Bill, who'd been a financial advisor before retiring. I explained the situation without mentioning names. Classic scam, he said without hesitation. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Someone's taking advantage of your son, Harry. Or my son is trying to take advantage of me, I thought, but didn't say. That evening I did something I'd never done before. I looked up Robert's financials. As a co-signer on his first house years ago, I still had access to some of his accounts. What I found sent a chill through me. Multiple maxed-out credit cards, a second mortgage on their house, a personal loan with an astronomical interest rate. They weren't looking for investment capital. They were drowning in debt. When they returned 2 days later for my answer, I was prepared. Robert looked hopeful, Melissa confident. They declined coffee at first, but when I said I needed to discuss something serious, Melissa offered to make it herself. "I know how you like it, Harry," she said with unusual warmth. I watched from the living room as she moved around my kitchen with practiced ease, opening cabinets, finding sugar, and then reaching into her purse for something she stirred into my cup. "Here you go," she said, handing me the mug with that same secretive smile. "Just the way you like it." I accepted the cup but didn't drink. "I've made my decision about the money," I said, looking directly at my son. "The answer is no." The silence in my living room was deafening after I said no. Robert's face went slack with shock, like he couldn't believe his ears. Melissa, on the other hand, wasn't surprised at all. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and that smile, that perfect practiced smile, never wavered. "Dad, you don't understand," Robert stammered. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We've already put money down. We need this." I kept my hands steady around that coffee cup, still not drinking. "I understand perfectly, son. You're in debt, deep debt. And this isn't about any investment." Robert's face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" "I checked your accounts, Rob. The credit cards, the second mortgage, that payday loan. You're drowning." Melissa's smile finally disappeared. "You had no right to spy on our finances," she snapped, all pretense of warmth evaporating. "I had every right when you came asking for a third of everything I have left." I set the untouched coffee on the side table. "What's in this, Melissa?" She blinked rapidly. "What? The coffee? What did you put in it?" Robert looked confused, glancing between us. "Dad, what are you talking about? It's just coffee, is it?" I stood up slowly, my old knees protesting, because I saw her put something in it from her purse. "And it smells strange," Melissa laughed, "but it was too high, too forced. It's my special sweetener blend. I always carry it. You know how particular I am about my coffee. I've never seen you use any special sweetener in the 5 years you've been my daughter-in-law." Robert stood up now too, his face flushed. "Dad, you're being paranoid. Melissa was just trying to be nice. Like you're being nice asking for $100,000 for an investment that doesn't exist." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Robert and Melissa exchanged a quick glance, the kind married couple's perfect, a whole conversation in a single look. "We should go," Melissa said abruptly, gathering her purse. "You're obviously not in a reasonable mood today." "Take the coffee with you," I said, nodding toward the untouched mug. "Drink it yourself if it's so special." Her face hardened for just a second before the pleasant mask slipped back into place. "Don't be ridiculous, Harry. You're acting crazy." That word, crazy, as it hung in the air between us. The kind of word you use when you want others to doubt someone's sanity. They left in a hurry after that, Robert throwing worried glances back at me as Melissa practically dragged him to the car. I watched them drive away, then picked up the coffee cup carefully by the handle and set it aside. I wasn't sure what I was dealing with yet, but I knew something wasn't right. That night I couldn't sleep. The encounter kept replaying in my mind. Had I overreacted? Was I becoming a paranoid old man? But then I remembered Melissa's face when I refused to drink. That flash of something like anger or disappointment. The next morning, I called my old friend Jack, who'd retired from the police force 5 years back. "Jack, I need a favor," I said after exchanging pleasantries. "Something unusual happened yesterday, and I'm not sure if I'm overreacting." I explained about the coffee. Robert's financial troubles and their desperate need for my money. Jack listened without interrupting. Got the coffee cup still? He asked when I finished. Yes, haven't touched it since. Oh, good, wrap it carefully. I know someone at the lab who owes me a favor. They can test it quietly, and no questions asked. 2 hours later, Jack was at my door, carefully packaging the cup and its contents in evidence bags. Old habits die hard for retired cops. This might be nothing. Harry, he said, looking at me with concern, you ready for that? I'd prefer it to be nothing, I replied honestly. But something doesn't feel right about any of this. After Jack left, I sat in my quiet house thinking about all the little things that hadn't quite added up over the years. Robert and Melissa's increasing financial needs despite their good jobs. The way Melissa always seemed to find reasons why I shouldn't visit their house unannounced. The gradual distancing of my grandchildren from me. A memory surfaced from 3 months ago. I'd stopped by their house unexpectedly with a birthday gift for my grandson Tommy. Melissa had answered the door looking flustered. Quickly stepping outside and closing the door behind her. Harry, this isn't a good time, she'd said, taking the wrapped present from my hands. Tommy's not feeling well. But as I was walking back to my car, I'd heard children's laughter from the backyard. When I looked over the fence, I saw Tommy running through the sprinkler with neighborhood kids, looking perfectly healthy. At the time, I'd brushed it off. Maybe he'd been sick earlier. Maybe they had other plans. But now it took on a different meaning. 2 days after the coffee incident, Jack called me at 7:30 in the morning. Harry, his voice was tight with tension. You need to come down to my place now. What did they find? I asked, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear, not over the phone. Just come. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in Jack's kitchen, staring at a laboratory report I could barely comprehend. Technical terms and chemical compounds swam before my eyes, but Jack's explanation was crystal clear. Diazepam, Harry. A pretty strong dose, too. Someone was trying to drug you, not kill you. My hands trembled as I set down the paper. Diazepam, like Valium. Jack nodded grimly. Enough to knock you out cold or make you extremely disoriented. The lab guy said you'd have been completely incapacitated within 20 minutes of drinking it. The pieces started coming together in my mind. They wanted me out of it, so I'd sign something. The money. Most likely, Jack agreed. You refuse to give them the money. So they try a different approach. Get you to sign transfer papers while you're drugged. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. My own son? We don't know how involved Robert is, Jack said carefully. Could be he's being manipulated too. But I remembered that look they exchanged, the way Robert defended her so quickly. He knew, maybe not about the drugging specifically, but he knew they were trying to get my money through deception. I spent the next day in a fog, trying to process this betrayal. I kept the doors locked and didn't answer the phone. Then, around dinner time, there was a knock at my door. Looking through the peephole, I saw Robert standing there alone, his expression troubled. Against my better judgment, I opened the door but kept the chain on. Dad, he looked relieved to see me. I've been worried. You haven't been answering your phone. I needed some time to think, I said carefully. Can I come in? I want to apologize for how things went the other day. I hesitated, then unlatched the chain. Robert was my son, after all. Whatever was happening, I needed to understand his part in it. He sat on the couch, looking around nervously. Dad, about the money. I shouldn't have pressured you. It's just that we're in a really tight spot financially. I know that, Robert. Why didn't you just tell me the truth instead of making up some investment story? He looked down at his hands. Melissa thought you wouldn't help if you knew we were in debt. That you'd lecture us about responsibility instead. So you lied to me. It wasn't a question, Robert nodded, looking miserable. The debts are bad, Dad, really bad. We might lose the house. I studied my son's face, searching for the boy I'd raised. And the coffee. What was Melissa's plan there? His head snapped up, confusion in his eyes. The coffee? What about it? Either he was an excellent actor, or he genuinely didn't know. I decided to test him. Robert, I had that coffee tested. There was diazepam in it, Valium. A lot of it. All the color drained from his face. What? No, that can't be right. The lab results don't lie. Your wife tried to drug me, probably so I'd sign something while incapacitated. Robert stood up abruptly, pacing the room. No. She wouldn't. She couldn't. Think about it, son. The special sweetener she claimed to always carry. The way she got angry when I wouldn't drink it. He stopped pacing, a horrified realization spreading across his face. "The papers in her purse. She said they were just in case you changed your mind about the money. Transfer forms already filled out." A sick feeling washed over me. "You really didn't know?" Robert sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I swear, Dad, I knew we were desperate, but I never thought I wouldn't have let her." The front door opened suddenly and Melissa walked in without knocking. She'd always had a key, but I'd never felt uncomfortable about that until now. "There you are," she said to Robert, her voice falsely cheerful. "I was wondering where you disappeared to." Then she noticed my expression and Robert's posture. "What's going on?" "We know about the diazepam, Melissa," I said quietly. She froze for just a second, then laughed. "What are you talking about?" "I had the coffee tested. A lab confirmed it was laced with Valium." "That's ridiculous," she scoffed, but her eyes darted to Robert, looking for support. "Robert, your father is confused. Maybe it's time we talked about getting him some help." Robert lifted his head, and the look he gave his wife chilled me. "Stop it, Melissa, just stop. The lab confirmed it." "Labs make mistakes," she insisted, her voice rising. "And why would you test coffee? That's paranoid behavior." "Robert, can't you see your father needs medical attention?" "This delusion—" "I saw you put something in his cup," Robert interrupted, his voice hollow. "I thought it was sweetener, like you said, but I saw you." Melissa's facade cracked. Anger flashed across her face. Then she quickly composed herself. "You don't understand the pressure we're under. The debts. Your father has all this money just sitting there while we're about to lose everything. So you thought drugging me was the answer?" I asked. "It wouldn't have hurt you," she said defensively. "Just made you relaxed enough to sign the transfer. You'd have slept it off and probably not even remembered." Robert stood up, backing away from her. "My God, Melissa, listen to yourself. You're talking about drugging my father. For us, Robert. For our future. Your father doesn't need all that money. He's just being selfish, hoarding it while we suffer." I watched my son's face as reality hit him. The woman he married, the mother of his children, had been willing to drug an elderly man, his father, for money. "We need to go," Robert said, his voice strange and distant. Now, Melissa realized she'd lost control of the situation. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at me. "This isn't over, Harry. Robert, let's go." As they left, Robert paused at the door, looking back at me with devastated eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'll call you later." After they were gone, I sank into my chair, trembling. I'd been right about Melissa, but the confirmation brought no satisfaction. Only a deep sadness that my son had married someone capable of such a thing, and fear about what might happen next. Jack called the following morning. "Harry, you need to make a police report. What she did was attempted elder abuse, possibly attempted fraud. She's still my daughter-in-law. Jack, the mother of my grandchildren. She tried to drug you. Harry, what's to stop her from trying something worse next time?" His words hung in the air unanswered. I couldn't bring myself to press charges against my son's wife, not yet. But I did take precautions. I changed the locks on my doors. I called my lawyer and updated my will, adding specific language that would prevent any transfers made under duress from being valid. 3 days after the confrontation, Robert called me. "Dad," his voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept. "I've moved out. Taken the kids to my sister's for now." Relief washed over me. "You believe me then?" "I found her stash," he said quietly. A prescription bottle of diazepam in her nightstand. It wasn't prescribed to her. I think she's been planning this for a while." My blood ran cold. "Robert, what else have you found?" A long pause. "Life insurance policies, on you. 3 of them, taken out over the last 2 years. I'm listed as the beneficiary, but the paperwork is all in her handwriting. I never signed up for these." The implication hit me like a physical blow. This went beyond trying to get my money while I was alive. Melissa had been planning for my death. "Dad, I don't know who she is anymore," Robert's voice broke. "I don't know who I've been living with." That night, unable to sleep, I sat at my kitchen table with a real cup of coffee, thinking about how close I'd come to drinking that doctored cup. If I hadn't seen Melissa put something in it, if I hadn't been suspicious enough to have it tested, my phone rang at 11:30 p.m. Robert again. "Dad," his voice was urgent, "lock your doors. Don't open them for anyone, not even me." "What's happening?" "Melissa's gone." She took her car, emptied our joint account. "And Dad, the gun is missing." My heart nearly stopped. Gun? What gun? I bought a handgun last year after that break-in down the street. She knows where I kept it. His voice was frantic now. I've called the police, but they said they can't do anything until she actually does something threatening. I'm on my way to you now. I hung up and immediately checked all my doors and windows. As I was securing the back door, I saw headlights pulling into my driveway. Moving to the front window, I peered through the curtains expecting to see Robert's car. Instead, I saw Melissa's white SUV, its headlights cutting through the darkness. She was sitting behind the wheel, just staring at my house. Even from a distance, in the dim glow of the dashboard lights, I could see the determined set of her face. My hands shook as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My voice came out shakier than I intended. There's a woman outside my house. My daughter-in-law. She's just sitting in her car watching my house. My son just called to tell me she took his gun and emptied their bank account. Is she threatening you directly, sir? Not yet, but has she attempted to enter your property? No, she's just sitting there, but my son said, we'll send an officer to do a wellness check, sir. In the meantime, stay inside with your doors locked. What's your address? I gave them my information, trying to keep my voice steady. Through the window, Melissa hadn't moved. She just sat there staring at my house, the glow from her dashboard illuminating her face in an eerie light. What was she waiting for? Was she working up the courage to come in? Or was she hoping I'd come out? 15 minutes later, I saw red and blue lights reflecting off the houses down the street. A police cruiser pulled up behind Melissa's SUV, and an officer approached her vehicle. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could see Melissa gesturing animatedly, her hands moving as she spoke to the officer. Another set of headlights turned onto my street. Robert's car. He parked across the street and jumped out, running toward the police cruiser and Melissa. My heart pounded as I watched this scene unfold from behind my curtains, feeling like I was watching a movie about my own life. The officer spoke with both of them for several minutes. Then he approached my front door. I opened it before he could knock. Mr. Jenkins. I'm Officer Dawson. Mind if I come in for a moment? I let him in, noticing how he scanned the room with practiced efficiency. Your daughter-in-law says she was just dropping something off for you but was working up the courage to approach the house. Says there's been a family misunderstanding. Did you find a gun? I asked. Officer Dawson's expression shifted slightly. We did find a handgun in her vehicle, yes. It's registered to your son. She claims he asked her to bring it to you for safekeeping. That's a lie, I said firmly. My son called to warn me she had taken the gun without his permission. He was concerned for my safety. The officer nodded, making a note. Your son confirmed that outside. We've secured the weapon. Relief flooded through me. Is she being arrested? Not at this time. Having a legally registered firearm in a vehicle isn't a crime in itself, even if there's a dispute about permission. But we've advised her to leave the premises. Your son is taking her back to their house to collect some things, and then she'll be staying elsewhere for the time being. After the officer left, Robert came to the door. He looked exhausted, his eyes rimmed with red. Dad, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I never thought. I didn't know who she really was. I pulled him into a hug, feeling his shoulders shake as he tried not to cry. My son, my little boy who'd once looked up to me with such trust, now broken by someone he'd thought loved him. It's not your fault, I told him. Some people are good at hiding who they really are. We sat at my kitchen table, and I made us both some coffee. Real coffee, no special additives. Robert told me everything. How he'd confronted Melissa after leaving my house, how she'd first denied everything, then tried to justify her actions by saying it was for their future. When I told her I was leaving, taking the kids, she just changed, Robert said, staring into his coffee. It was like watching someone put on a mask. She said if I left her, she'd make sure I lost everything, the kids, the house, my reputation. She said no one would believe me over her. That's when she took the gun. Robert nodded. I went to pick up the kids from my sisters. When I got back home, she was gone, along with the gun and all the cash we had in the house. Our bank account had been drained too. We talked late into the night, piecing together the puzzle of the woman who had entered our lives. Robert had been married to Melissa for 5 years, but now he wondered if he'd ever really known her at all. The next morning, Jack came by with more disturbing news. I did some digging, he said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. Your daughter-in-law's name wasn't always Melissa Carter. She was born Melissa Donovan. then became Melissa Winston after her first marriage, then Melissa Blackwell after her second. Second? Robert looked stunned. She told me she'd only been married once before, briefly in college. Jack shook his head. 3 marriages before you, Robert. And all 3 of her ex-husbands were significantly older, wealthy men. My stomach tightened as Jack continued. Her first husband died suddenly, heart attack at 58, left her everything. Her second husband lost everything in a series of bad investments she encouraged. The third filed for divorce after his children intervened. They suspected she was tampering with his medication. "Oh, God," Robert whispered. "No charges were ever filed," Jack added. "But there were suspicions. And after each marriage ended, she changed her name slightly and moved to a new state." I looked at my son, seeing the realization dawning on his face. "She was targeting me all along, wasn't she? The inheritance, the life insurance policies?" "It looks that way," Jack said gently. "Your age difference, your financial security, you fit the pattern of her previous husbands." Robert put his head in his hands. "What about me? Where did I fit into her plan?" Jack and I exchanged a look. "My guess? You were her way in," I said. "The trusting son who would convince his father to help when they needed money. And when that didn't work, she moved to Plan B," Robert finished, "drugging you to get access to your accounts. And when that failed, Plan C might have been something worse," Jack added grimly. The following days were a blur of police reports, lawyer consultations and court appearances. Melissa was charged with attempted fraud for trying to drug me, but the evidence for anything more serious wasn't strong enough. The life insurance policies weren't illegal, just suspicious given the context. Robert filed for divorce and emergency custody of the children. Melissa fought back with a viciousness that stunned everyone, claiming Robert was unstable and that I was a controlling influence who had turned her husband against her. 2 weeks after that night when Melissa sat in her car outside my house, we found ourselves in family court. I'd been called to testify about the drugged coffee incident. As I took the stand, I saw Melissa sitting beside her lawyer, looking demure and vulnerable in a conservative blue dress, her hair pulled back simply. Gone was the confident, stylish woman I'd known for 5 years. In her place sat someone who looked like she could be the poster child for a wronged wife. Her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman with an expensive suit, approached for cross-examination after I'd given my testimony about the coffee and lab results. "Mr. Jenkins, isn't it true that you've never approved of your son's marriage to my client?" "That's not true," I said. "I welcomed Melissa into our family. Yet you've repeatedly refused to help them financially when they were in need. I've helped them many times over the years. What I refused was a single large sum that would have emptied a third of my retirement savings." She paced in front of the stand. "And isn't it convenient that right after refusing this money, you suddenly claim my client tried to drug you? A claim for which we only have your word, and the word of your friend, a retired police officer with no official standing. The lab results, a private lab test arranged by your friend with no official chain of custody for the evidence, hardly conclusive proof." I felt my face growing hot. "Why would I make this up? Perhaps because you didn't want to give your son the money he needed. Perhaps because you've always resented my client's influence over your son. Perhaps because at 72 you're becoming paranoid and confused." There it was, the confused elderly man card I'd been expecting. Before I could respond, Melissa's lawyer continued. "Mr. Jenkins, have you ever been diagnosed with any memory issues or cognitive decline?" "No, I have not. Yet you expect this court to believe that my client, a loving wife and mother with no criminal record, suddenly decided to drug you rather than simply accept your refusal of financial help." I took a deep breath. I didn't believe it either, until I saw the lab results, and then found out about her previous marriages. A flash of something, anger, fear, crossed Melissa's face before she composed herself again. The judge leaned forward. "Previous marriages?" "The court was only informed of one previous marriage." Robert's lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, we've recently uncovered evidence that Mrs. Jenkins has been married 3 times before. Not once, as she claimed in her filings. We have documentation here." As the lawyers approached the bench with the papers, I watched Melissa whisper urgently to her attorney. The judge reviewed the documents, her expression growing more severe with each page. "Mrs. Jenkins," the judge said finally, "were you aware that providing false information in court filings is perjury?" Melissa's lawyer tried to intervene, but the damage was done. The carefully constructed image of the wronged wife was crumbling as the judge examined records of name changes, previous marriages, and financial windfalls that Melissa had never disclosed. When court recessed for the day, Robert and I walked out together. "Did you see her face when they brought up the marriages?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "I think she believed those records were buried too deep to find." "Jack did good work," Robert said. "I owe him. We both do." 3 days later, we returned for the judge's ruling. The courtroom was tense as we waited. Melissa sat ramrod straight beside her lawyer, her face unreadable. When the judge entered, everyone stood. After reviewing all evidence in this case, I find the claims against Mrs. Jenkins regarding attempted drugging to be concerning, but not conclusively proven to the standard required for criminal charges, the judge began. Melissa's shoulders relaxed. Slightly, however, the judge continued. The documented pattern of misrepresentation to this court, including false statements about her marital history and financial background, raises serious concerns about Mrs. Jenkins's credibility and character. The judge looked directly at Melissa. In matters of custody, the court's primary concern is the welfare and safety of the children. Given the demonstrated pattern of deception, I'm granting temporary full custody to Mr. Robert Jenkins, with supervised visitation rights for Mrs. Jenkins, pending completion of a full psychological evaluation. Melissa's face drained of color. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she shook her head sharply. Additionally, the judge continued, a restraining order is granted, prohibiting Mrs. Jenkins from approaching or contacting Mr. Harold Jenkins. Given the circumstances and disputed allegations, this is a precautionary measure to ensure everyone's safety during these proceedings. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough. Melissa wouldn't be able to come near me or have unsupervised time with my grandchildren until experts had evaluated her mental state. And with her history now exposed, Robert's divorce proceedings would have a solid foundation. As we left the courthouse, Robert put his hand on my shoulder. "Dad, I don't know how to thank you." "If you hadn't been so vigilant about that coffee," I squeezed his arm. "You would have figured it out eventually, son. Maybe too late," he said quietly. 6 months passed. Robert and the kids moved into my house temporarily, while the divorce proceedings continued. It was chaotic having children running around my quiet home, but it was also healing. The sound of my grandchildren's laughter filled spaces that had been silent for too long. Melissa eventually agreed to a divorce settlement that gave Robert full custody, with her receiving limited supervised visitation. The criminal investigation into the drugged coffee was closed due to insufficient evidence, but the restraining order against her remained in place. One evening, as Robert and I sat on my back porch, watching the sunset after the kids had gone to bed, he asked the question that had been hanging between us for months. "Why didn't you tell me what was happening? About the money troubles, the loans? Why did you keep helping us without saying anything?" I thought about it for a moment. When you're a parent, you want to protect your children from everything. Sometimes that means helping silently, hoping they'll find their way. "I should have been more honest with you sooner." "And I should have been more honest with you," Robert said, "about our finances, about how controlling Melissa had become." I was embarrassed. "I didn't want you to think I'd failed." "You haven't failed, son. You're starting over. That takes more courage than never falling down in the first place." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. "I've been thinking," Robert said finally. "Maybe we could start a small business together. Something for the future, for the kids. I've got skills in technology, you've got experience in management." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the evening sun. "I'd like that." Looking back now, I can't say I'm glad for what happened. The betrayal, the fear, the courtroom battles, none of that is something I'd wish on anyone. But I am grateful for what came after. For the honest conversations with my son, for the chance to be a daily part of my grandchildren's lives, for the small business we built together that has given Robert a fresh start. I learned that money doesn't just reveal who people are, it reveals who they think you are. To Melissa, I was just a wallet with an expiration date. To my son, I was the safety net he was ashamed to admit he needed. But now we see each other clearly. No secrets, no shame, no silent expectations. Sometimes refusing to give someone what they want is the greatest gift you can offer them. It forces truth to the surface, and truth, however painful, is always worth more than comfortable lies. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And I'm curious, on a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments below, and tell me if you've ever had to make a tough decision that ended up saving you from something worse.